Houston, we have a podcast. Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, episode 28, 3 weeks in a capsule. I'm Gary Jordan, and I'll be your host today. So this is the podcast where we bring in the experts, NASA scientists, engineers, astronauts, all to tell you the coolest information about what's going on here at NASA. So today we're talking about what it would be like to live and work in the Orion capsule with Jessica Voss. She's a crew systems engineer here at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And we had a great discussion about how astronauts will operate in the Orion capsule for missions that can go up to 3 weeks, like how they'll eat, sleep, exercise, work, and if needed, be prepared for the worst. So with no further delay, let's go light speed and jump right ahead to our talk with Miss Jessica Voss. Enjoy.
Minus 5 seconds and counting. Mark. Launch commit lights are correct.
There she goes. Houston, we have a podcast.
So living on Orion is going to be tough. How long are the missions that you're going to be living? If you were to say you're going to live on Orion for blank, what are you planning for? How long of a mission?
The longest that we're really thinking, it's designed to do 4 crew for 21 days. The longest that we're really thinking that will really work out is probably in that like 15, 16 day range.
Huh.
Because once you start docking to DSG, you've got facilities there. So you would just basically kind of shut down or close off the Orion and go use your habitat module, the much bigger, spacious, better stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing, you're going to be on a transport vehicle when you're going that has some sort of a habitat kind of feature to it when you're going to Mars.
Right.
So the just Orion piece would the longest you'd really need to be living in there is it's designed for 21 days. So.
Okay. And that 21 days takes into account in case something goes wrong and you need some extra time, or is it just the redundancy aspect of things?
Well, it was more like the sizing.
Sizing.
You
okay.
can try to squeeze a mission in that's right up to your 21 days, and then you just have no margin for, anything.
Yeah.
But the size of all of the consumables and how much, CO2 scrubbing and how much water you need is stuff. It's for 4 crew for 21 days.
Okay. So then more likely it'll be like the 16-day thing. Cool. So today let's talk about just Orion, living on it, and what that's going to look like. Like you said, the 21-day mission profile, it can support someone for 21 days and what that's going to look like if you were to live there for, up to that much, but probably, like you said, shorter, 16 days. So let's start with Orion, like what is it? Because we talked with Najud Moranci about this in a previous episode, but for those who didn't listen to it, let's talk about, what is Orion? What's the shape of it? Like, if you were living in it, what's this house look like?
Okay, so basically volume-wise, you're talking about maybe like a double minivan, So, like, if you take the size of a minivan, if you've ever been on a road trip, you try to squeeze 4 or 6 people in a minivan, it can be kind of tight. But if you double that volume, that's kind of what we're talking about. It's about 300 cubic feet of space. We are talking about putting 4 people in. And the shape is very similar to what you saw in the Apollo days in terms of that cone capsule, right? Physics kind of dictates that in terms of how, when you're coming back from deep space, there's a lot of energy that needs to be released through the atmosphere, and that particular blunt body shape does that really well. So you've got that, the wide bottom with the skinnier top makes it look like a little cone. So very similar to that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But sounds like you said double minivan for 4 people. That's more space than I would think.
Yeah, and what's even better about it is the fact that you've got all of the volume to work with once you're in microgravity.
That's
so
right.
You don't just have the floor space, or you now have this really truly 3D space to do whatever you need to do in. So it's not just the 4 people in a double minivan in their seats and rocking around on the bottom of the car. Or being strapped in their seats. It's truly floating within that space. So.
Okay, so you got this double minivan sort of space. How about the lay of the land? I'm imagining the one in Building 9, the mock-up of it. Once you enter through that hatch, what are you looking at? Like, where are the seats, where are the screens, where's all that stuff?
Yeah, so we are fortunate enough to have a full-scale Orion mock-up here in Building 9 at Johnson Space Center.
Cool.
In the Space Vehicle mock-up facility, it's like a big playground for spacecraft. When we enter our mock-up, you enter through the side hatch, and as you enter, you first step on a step, and when you get in, you'll see there's a little bit of a space between your foot and the seat pan, the leg pan of the seats for the crew. And there are 4 of those seats aligned 2 and 2. So 2 of them they don't stack, like lay on top of each other like bunk beds. It's not like that. But they're aligned 2 and 2 in like rows to your left.
Okay.
If the crew were laying in their seats, to see you as you come into the side hatch, they would need to turn their heads to the right.
Okay.
So their
the first,
feet
the first thing you see are their feet, and their heads are kind of towards the wall.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So their legs are kind of oriented towards the center of the spacecraft, and their heads are toward the outside, and that's so that their heads can line up pretty much directly underneath the displays and controls, as well as the windows.
Oh.
So without moving their head a whole lot, they have visibility to look out the windows for orientation during dynamic phases of flight and understanding where they are relative to the stars through the window. And then they also have all of the information that they need to execute those maneuvers on the displays and controls right in front of them. It also is a real interesting thing about that design of the seats. They don't have to do a whole lot of manipulation. Like if you think about, why don't we do really super fancy touch screens? Well, if you're in a vibration environment, like during launch, your hands are really heavy, actually, and your fingers are going to be moving around if you unstrap them from that seat and then try to go touch the screen. Right. So they much prefer, of course, the switches and the dials and the buttons, which we have on the outer edges of our displays and controls. We recently did some testing. It was I think it was last year, about this time last year, where we did a legibility under vibration test with the crew. And so you had the whole system of the seat, the suit, and the human all vibrating under what we would what we have determined to be our launch loading condition, the vibration condition. And then they have to tell us, basically, are they able to read the screen and execute what they're supposed to be doing based on those commands under the vibration condition. So the whole point is that they're able to do what they need to be doing under all the dynamic phases of flight. So the design is for that purpose.
All right. Yeah, I'm imagining like I don't know if you've ever been like in the car or something. You see the clock like going up and down, like the digital clock, and it's really hard to read. And you're like, "What time is it?"
And if you do need to reach and push the button next to the clock, like, can you? Are you going to push the right one?
That's true, because under launch you got all this weight on you. So then after that you got the screens. So then they have these buttons around the screens, right, that you can press.
Yep.
So that's and that's part of the design, right? 3 screens.
Yes, that is part of the design. You've got 2 people monitoring those 3 screens. So you've got a little bit of that kind of ability for both people to operate both screens. Now, or I would say 2 screens at a time. So that middle screen, you're going to get people being reach and access wise. Those 2 crew members, co-pilot and pilot, are going to be able to both see and touch at least those 2 screens in front of them. And then you've kind of got the outer screens being monitored by 1 person at a time. Okay. The switches are very important. That's what gives them that tactile feedback of knowing that they've actually done something while they have their gloves on. So it's easy for us, with the fancy iPhones, to just really gently feel a tap on the home screen button, right? But that's not the same when you've got layers of a suit going around your hands, right? So for them to know that they indeed have actuated something, that they really like that switch feel. And so there are specific designs around how those switches feel to the crew member, and to make sure that they know that they have, in fact, actuated what they were supposed to actuate.
Yeah, it's the space version of responsive design for like as if your phone, but a lot of other things to consider. Yep. Awesome. So that's like that's the pilot area, and that's where you would I guess, quote unquote, fly Orion, right? So is this the rest of the area that you're looking at? Like you said, when you go through the hatch, this whole area, is that the living area, or is there more?
So there is space that's back behind their heads,
Okay.
and that we call that the ECLS wall. ECLS is Environmental Control and Life Support. So there's like a wall back there that houses all of that equipment, and then in front of that is a bunch of stowage, a bunch of like webbing kind of material that
Yeah.
you kind of carabiner hook to different D-rings and places to kind of stow stuff in and kind of keep it stowed back there. Underneath the pallet, underneath the floor is more stowage. That is also where some of the avionics bays are, I believe, and then is some of the other systems for the vehicle that humans require, such as the waste management system.
Very important.
Very important. So yeah, somehow it all squeezes in there.
Okay, and that's really what Orion is trying to get, like this camper that you're going to be living in for 20 or 16, 21 days, whatever, and just squeeze all this stuff in that you need for all of that stuff, knowing that it's not like you can stop at a convenience store or gas station along the way to pick anything up.
Exactly. In fact, as I speak to you this afternoon, there's a team of engineers at one of the off-site mock-up facilities that are doing a stowage evaluation. So they're literally right now playing that 3D game of Tetris and trying to figure out where all this mass and stuff is going to go. Because you also have to think about the CG of the vehicle, both on launch and on landing. It's got to be very specific. So things have to be put in certain places. And then there's also another very good consideration or important consideration, and that is with respect to reach and access. With the crew coming home and going through this dynamic phase of flight, there are certain things that you're going to want them to be able to get to pretty much right away. So there's some stowage that is literally right on their seats. There's stowage of things that's right next to them, or such that one particular crew member can get there in a very quick amount of time. So it's not like you can just put stuff wherever you want to. There's also consideration, right, for not storing things like food next to things like the WMS. So it gets tricky. And so they redo these evaluations as the designs for all of this equipment, crew equipment, matures.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get some tips from you for my dad, because to how to pack a camper for a camping trip to make it the most efficient way possible. He can definitely appreciate that, because he's an expert packer, but not compared to an Orion Crew Systems engineer.
Yeah, these guys have got it down, I'm telling you.
Wow. All right. So obviously, you're maximizing the limited space that you have and thinking about every component, about where things are stored and where things are. So, the living portion of things, right? What's the lay of the land for, now you can get out of your seat and it's time to go do stuff. Where's everything else, like food?
So there is a series of lockers, both on that kind of ECLS wall that I was telling you about, and a few more underneath the pallet on the floor. And I think portions of the food are stored in both of those places, if I understand correctly. It could be that all of them may be in one of the lockers underneath the seats, now that I'm thinking about it. But they are each stored. The way that the food is going to be stored is very similar to what we see currently on the space station, which is that they're flown up in very specific sized compartments. I think they call them CTBs. And they'll be organized either by crew member or by type of food that it is, and each of those gets put into a certain locker and given a certain spot to be.
Yeah.
That's the same for a lot of the equipment. Actually, it's all going to be in a particular locker. There's a few different sizes of lockers and a few different kind of orientations, but it's all stowed away. Mm-hmm. I think more interestingly, there is the exercise device. And the exercise device is this neat little box that is going to serve as the step to the side hatch as well. So in zero gravity, of course, you don't need a step, right, to do anything with the side hatch. You're not using the side hatch. You really don't want that hatch to open on orbit. But on landing, when the crew's somewhat deconditioned after having been in microgravity for 16 to 21 days, they might need a step to get up and over that edge. So the idea is that this box that's taking up space serves two functions. It's going to be the step to allow the crew to get in and out, and the recovery crew as well, and it's the exercise device. And right now, the exercise device is planned to be, it's kind of cool because it doesn't require any power. It's just a flywheel-based device that's got some smart settings to it that allow the crew to execute different prescriptions that the ACERs give them. That's the Astronaut Strength and Conditioning Rehabilitation Specialists, I think.
Gotta have
the
an acronym.
ACERs.
Yeah.
They provide the exercise prescriptions, and that one box alone will allow the crew members to get at least 30 minutes of exercise activity that will challenge their cardiovascular systems and their musculoskeletal systems as required. So,
all right.
Yeah.
So a little tiny box, and it's kind of like I'm imagining a rowing machine, right, that you would see in the gym, kind of like that, but obviously more advanced, so it can do aerobic and resistive exercise, meet all the needs that you need.
Right.
Because Space Station right now has the advanced resistive exercise device, which is
Absolutely.
like a big weightlifting machine. You don't have room for that.
No, we got no room for that.
And it's got a treadmill. I mean, from what Najut said, you could potentially stand up, right? If you were to, like, touch the base, like, there's enough room where you can stand up straight.
Yes, you can. I believe. I know I can, but I'm only 5'3".
Oh, okay.
So I don't know that I believe the crew module is sized for, I think, up to a 6'4" individual, if
Wow.
I'm correct. So yeah, you don't have to be particularly short. You will, there is limits to which seat we can put you in if you are on that taller edge.
Oh.
And I do believe that I think somebody at least up to 6 foot would be able to, like Najut said, stand in the center of the capsule.
Wow.
But you're right, when you're rowing, you're still going to get into a standing stature position, but in zero gravity, we're going to have you do it through the center of the spacecraft.
So you're not going up to the tip of the cone.
You're not
right?
going
You're
up. You're not going up to where the docking hatch is on the top at the tip. You're going to the other side of the spacecraft. So you're starting at the side hatch, right underneath the side hatch, and you're extending your body long out to the other side of the spacecraft.
Okay. So so that takes up a decent amount of real estate, right? That's the
sure does.
Working out real estate. And where is everyone else while someone is working out? I guess they're all in the same room, right?
They absolutely are. And it's funny because when you think about how much time is really going to be spent each day, when you have 4 crew members doing at least 30 minutes each, we're talking a couple hours that person is going to be basically occupying a good chunk of the space while they exercise, and everyone else is going to have to be kind of staying out of the way, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting.
Plus the noise. I'm thinking of a rowing machine, right? So plus the noise of ramp, ramp.
Oh yeah,
For
absolutely.
hours.
That's a good topic actually, because
Really?
there are several acoustic requirements imposed on every system that goes into the cabin for just that reason. Like it's very hard to concentrate and focus and get real work done, right? If you are constantly having to deal with a buzz, how annoying that can be.
Yes.
So there are a lot of acoustic requirements placed on all of the different systems that have to be continuously operating. And yeah,
Really?
the exercise device is one of them. Absolutely.
So there's an acoustic. It can't exceed like this noise level or something.
Certain, yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So have you simulated something like an environment where people are living in Orion for a couple days already, or is that still to come? Like, so you can understand the acoustic environment and say, hey, that's annoying, or something like that.
So there has not been, to my knowledge, any day in the life of type of tests specific to the Orion capsule. However, there have been a series of analog tests being done in terms of the isolated environment.
Mm-hmm.
So right here at Johnson Space Center, the Human Research Program owns the HERA, which is the Human Exploration Research Analog.
Yeah.
And they do study how humans behave in isolation and the effects on team dynamics, and they try to stress them out a little bit, right, and try to see how they can improve on the team dynamics. Basically, it's very BHP, behavioral health and performance oriented, not as much as hey, what is the Orion design adequate or sufficient? We haven't gotten to that point with the Orion design yet in terms of verification and validation. We will with EM1 and EM2. We've got sensors on the EM1 mission that uses the Orion capsule that will measure acoustics and radiation and all that good stuff. But in terms of the people aspect, we've studied it here through the Human Research Program in HERA, and unfortunately, the volume of that is just way beyond what it's huge in there.
Yeah.
So they have way more volume and space to live and work in.
Yeah.
The acoustics, though, I would say is probably one of the things that they do tweak to try to see if it stresses the crew out. But I couldn't speak to the results of that. But I'm sure that it's one of the things that they try to tweak as a variable to see what kind of impacts in terms of stress it has on the crew.
Definitely. We actually just had Lisa Spence and Paul Haugen here earlier today to talk about HERA. And by the time this comes out, I believe there's the HERA episode already, Space Habitats. So
Awesome.
there should already be a little bit more about that. And I was picking her brain, but obviously they're still researching. They still have to collect the data, so they haven't like, consolidated everything into a published paper quite yet, and more to come. But absolutely, totally transferable to an Orion environment, the human element to that, right? So, what other sorts of living systems are on Orion? I guess. Well, okay, I'll lead you in the right direction for example, environmental, right? So to live, you have to, you're in space, but it's got to be a certain temperature, right? You got to have oxygen and carbon dioxide removal and stuff like that.
Yeah, those humans are rather picky, right? Like we take an exact, just so much of a temperature swing or a pressure swing, and we just get uncomfortable really fast. So there's a comfort in it and survival, right? Orion will be pressurized to 14.7 pounds per square inch, or PSI, which is exactly what you would see here in Houston, Texas, because we live pretty much at sea level. So that's fantastic. Don't really have to deal with any sort of feelings or impacts to performance due to changes in pressure.
Cool.
The air is also the exact same concentration of oxygen and nitrogen and all the rest of the trace contaminants. We should be cleaner, honestly. So we're looking at 21% oxygen and the rest nitrogen for the most part. So.
All right. So it's okay. So it's emulating all of that, and all of this is in a tiny. Is the environmental systems, did they have to be designed to be more compact, or was it kind of a cut and paste sort of technology?
Great question. So I believe that what we are flying on Orion is a fairly new and more compact system. It is a amine swing bed. It's a solid amine swing bed technology, of which we have 3 units. And it's designed to be, as most systems are on the spacecraft, anything that's needed for nominal missions and nominal mission duration for crew for 21 days. We try to design redundancy into, so that if something happens and you're just not quite sure what it was, okay, we know what, we're going to switch to this other thing instead, or we're just going to use the second one that we did, built into the system. So that's how the ECLA system is. We have 3 units, and each unit has 2 beds that swing. The purpose of the solid amine is to basically remove the CO2 from the air. There's other kinds of filters within that system that'll take out other types of contaminants, but the main thing that we're really worried about from a human health perspective and human performance perspective is that CO2. So it'll take out the CO2. It basically attaches. It's solid amine is really sticky. It likes the CO2, and then when we flip the bed and expose it to vacuum, all of it goes away. So once the bed is full, you turn around, expose it to vacuum. I think it's like 20 minutes or something max, and then you flip it around again. And we have 3 different units that do that same process.
All right. All right. So pretty efficient then, I would guess, right? Because you're right. You built in the redundancy. Yep. And talking with Najood before, that redundancy is built like, all right, we can have this amount, but if we do, more redundant systems, then that's more weight. So what's the right amount? And then boom, you locked in on the 3, you said, right? Yep. Yeah, very cool.
Yep. And there's every single system has to have that trade of how much fault tolerance you're going to build into it. Some systems we just say, you know what, we're going to have to, we can't afford it. We're going to have to fly in terms of mass. So we don't have the spare mass for this one versus this other more important one that we need the mass for. Mm-hmm. So we are going to decide to control it via operational controls in flight instead. Just make sure that we only operate it for this much time, or we only use it for this much. And you can, those are some of the other ways that you can manage the resources and the consumables that you don't have extra of, right?
Yeah.
And power is like that quite a bit. It's the same way on the space station right now. You have to know exactly what you're plugging into and how long you're plugging into it, because you could short something else out over here,
Ooh, yeah.
So.
So I guess Orion has power constraints too, right?
Yes.
Is it going to be solar powered?
Yes.
Okay, very cool. So how is the solar panels now? Because I've seen various pictures in the past of, you got the ones that are more circular and ones that are more like an X. So
We're the X.
We're the X now? Cool.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, we are the X. We've got 4.
Sweet.
That kind of do the pretty unfolding thing.
All right.
So, yeah, but they extend out fairly long. I don't know the exact numbers, but yeah.
Okay, and it'll be solar powered and okay, very cool. So another big one that I know about is, and you were talking about all the important stuff being around, the waste management, right? So you're going to be on there in the one room with 4 people for quite some time. So how is the bathroom situation?
Tiny. It is a very tiny, like smaller than a telephone booth, like closet thing.
All right.
It is very tiny, and it's really funny too because I believe as it's oriented right now, just because you only have so much room in the spacecraft, right? I think the exercise device sits right above the door for the WS.
No.
So you may have to interrupt somebody's exercise session to go in, and then interrupt it again to get out. So but that's what it's like when you're camping and living in a camper. It's how things go. So
it's true.
But yeah, the design of the actual system itself, of the potty itself, is similar in concept to what we use on station today.
Okay.
It's basically purposely driven airflow that's being intentionally directed in a certain way, to help stuff get out and not get all over the place.
Also very important.
Yes, and then it gets contained into a canister that's got some odor control features to it, and then once that canister gets full, it can be sealed and closed off, and then you stick a brand new one in, and so.
All right.
It's kind of a fancy bucket with a hose on the end of it, and some odor control features.
Hey, that's going to come in handy because that's right next to the exercise too.
Yes,
so that whole
I know.
area, I know I would hang out at the other side if I was at Orion for the most part, for sure.
But yeah, in general, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of privacy going to be offered on this vehicle. I mean, of course, they will. There's always the option of hanging up your sleeping bag. I think you had a question about that, and it's really more of just a blanket with neat Velcro straps on it that allow you to adjust the squeezability, right, how tight it is on your body, and then some D-rings to adhere it to some piece of the structure so that you don't go floating off into each other while you're sleeping. But there is the option of hanging that up, putting the D-ring up or getting it unfolded and sticking out so that you want to be behind it. But I can't imagine that with 21 days of taking that much time and energy to make sure that you get, behind your little curtain. I don't know. We'll see.
I would assume with a crew of 4 astronauts that are going on these missions, I would assume that they are going to be a very tight-knit group of people.
Yeah.
And just talking with space station astronauts and even Hera, just talking with them too, whenever you're with people in these environments, you learn to, teamwork is very important, camaraderie is very important, and all of that sort of translates into, if you're going to the bathroom, respect each other.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So just out of curiosity, actually, I'm thinking about the movie Apollo 13. So when they were on that trip, they didn't have the water recycling system that we have on the International Space Station. They literally ejected it out into space, and it sort of had this cool crystal effect as it was kind of floating away. Is that what's going to happen on Orion?
It absolutely is.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to be able to see it the same way, just based on where our windows are and where that ejection port is, but or evacuation port, I guess. But yeah, that's how we're going to do it.
Okay. I hope they get some good views. This kind of sounds weird to say, but it is kind of cool to see the crystallization of the peak.
Yeah, so I've heard.
One thing I was thinking about actually is we just moved right from flying the thing and where everyone's going to be sitting to just kind of living. But I know there's going to be a launch and entry suit that you have to wear at first, right? So these bulky orange suits, right? It's kind of like it's an upgraded new fancy pumpkin suit, right?
Right.
Kind of. So once you're wearing that and now you're in orbit and now you're transitioning to living on Orion, where does that pumpkin suit go?
So it has another locker.
A locker.
Yeah,
okay, cool.
Just another locker. But that suit becomes really important in some of on orbit. In the event that some emergency happens, like a depressed cabin. So if something happens that causes your cabin to depress for any reason, all of the systems in there, including the food system and everything are meant to be to provide for 144 hours of depressurized cabin survival.
Oh, okay.
So 144 hours, basically 6 days.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, worst case, you're on the far other side of the moon and something happens, your cabin depresses, and you have 6 days till you can get home.
From the far side of the moon, though, how long until you get home?
6 days.
Oh, okay. So it's literally planned for exactly that in worst case scenario.
It's meant to cover that worst case scenario. Absolutely.
Got it. Okay.
So in that event, you're getting in your suit and you're living in your suit. So that suit also has some unique features to it that this pumpkin suits from the Space Shuttle program did not have.
Oh, okay.
That would allow for, the collection and mitigation of human waste.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's 6 days worth of living, right?
Yeah. It's also going to allow you to take in some calories and some water.
Okay.
So there's special food bags and food consistent. What am I trying to say? Like material. Like it's going to be. You wouldn't normally eat it, but if you had to, it's going to be like this. I don't want to say sludge, but it's kind of like a powdery mixture that you would.
It's not like the running gel, right? Is it kind of like
It would be kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that would allow you to take in a lot of calories.
Yeah, that's what those are for,
in
right?
a pouch, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's specific to interfacing with the spacesuit and being operated with gloved hands and with a vacuum on the outside environment, right? So it's a pretty tricky thing to.
Is it like a straw that goes through the helmet or something, and then you squeeze it through? Or?
Basically, that's what you would see. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's how I'm imagining it. I'm sure it's more complicated.
Right. So there's a whole team of engineers that is working on putting that system together to make sure that the crew won't be starving for that 144 hours that they will. But you can't pop the visor. You can't. The whole interior of the spacecraft at that point is a vacuum.
Right.
So
you have to survive in this suit, and that suit has to support you for 6 days.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's cool. I actually think is it Cody Kelly?
Yes.
Is that the guy? Okay, yeah. I got his name about crew survival and stuff. I'm totally gonna have to bring him on the podcast.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. That would be he's a fun person and he does all the fun stuff. So
Awesome. That would be cool. Yeah, that so the suits themselves are designed, but then they go into a tiny little locker and then hands off for that.
In fact, the seats do as well.
The seats go in lockers.
Yeah, the whole cabin configuration just kind of changes from we're in flight mode to now we're in just coast mode, right?
Whoa!
And just live and do science experiments.
Do the screens stay?
Yes.
The screens stay. Chairs go. Suits go, and it opens up this whole thing.
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool. You know what I did skip over, because you did briefly mention it, and then I just sort of skipped over it, but beds, like sleeping. It sounds like it's just going to be a sleeping bag strapped to a wall.
Right, yeah, I was
right.
going to say, not so much with the beds. There's no mattress, but there's also no gravity, so it's kind of cool. And it's very similar to on Space Station.
Right.
They find themselves rather comfortable once, they adjust. That whole, the way you feel when you first enter microgravity and the first couple of days can be a little strange on the body, but you do get used to it fairly quickly. It only takes a couple of days, but once you're there, it's really comfortable. And what they do is they have a blanket that it's just thin though. It's not like a big poofy sleeping bag or anything like that. It's just thin because the temperature inside the cabin is that very comfortable kind of 72 to 75 degrees, and it's got various straps in places so that where you want to feel that snuggy feeling, right, you can do it tight. But for the most part, they actually like to just kind of leave it a little bit loose. And you'll see them, they kind of sleep like zombies. Like they have their arms out in front of them and they're just kind of hanging and they're floating. And it's funny because the station sleeping, quote unquote, sleeping bags they've got all of this straps and this and that to make sure your head doesn't go bobbling around, and so you can hook yourself to the wall and you can get it super tight if you want. And it just seems like none of that gets used. They just floating there feels nice. You know? If you can imagine if you just kind of let your body just float in a pool.
Oh yeah, that's a good feeling. That's a good feeling.
Yeah, so they're just like, all right, I'm going to sleep now. And they just lean back and let their arms float, and But they do, I think, at least give themselves a little bit of a restraint so that they know they're not going to end up in some somebody else's space overnight or into a different module entirely. So.
That's true. You don't want to play like space bumper cars in
Right.
the middle of the night, just kind of slamming into each other. That'd be weird. Yeah, just from talking to a couple astronauts, they've said sleeping, once you get used to it, sleeping in space is probably the best sleep you'll ever get. Because if you think about it, right, even in a bed here on Earth, you still have gravity pushing you against that bed. In space, you have
And it's
nothing.
pushing that weight of the blanket on you too, which is so comforting.
Oh,
right?
that
So-
is comforting, yeah.
Yeah.
But just nothing pressing on you, that's got to be a fantastic feeling.
Yeah.
I bet you it should.
yeah.
Just out of curiosity, for the way the mission is designed for Orion missions, would it be kind of lights out, crew go to sleep all at the same time, or are they going to be shifting?
They, as far as I understand it, there's not going to be much shifting. They're
Oh.
going to be on a very similar, in terms of a day-night schedule and sleep schedule, it'll be fairly similar. What
Okay.
they will shift is their exercise sessions and their kind of personal time sessions, but from a day-night cycle, it'd be the same.
Okay. Do you have the ability to sort of switch to like night mode and maybe turn the lights off or change them to like a warmer color?
Well, so that's interesting you asked that because lighting is a big deal in terms of the habitability of an environment,
Definitely.
right? You can have some really harsh lighting and just like headaches all the time, and just be really like, "Urgh," and it's due to the lighting. So I believe that the systems, there are requirements now for how we design habitable environments and what kind of lighting is required.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they've implemented some interesting new blue light stuff up on space station.
Yeah.
So I believe that is one of the going to be one of the capabilities with the lighting system in Orion is to have different basically modes of light. I don't know how fancy they're going to get because it's not like we've got the Lexus of spacecrafts here, but that is something that is, in terms of helping them stick to a cycle, a day-night cycle with the whole circadian rhythms and all of that stuff. All of that science has been done. We know it works, and so I believe that part of, at least some of that, is going to be implemented in the lighting system in Orion.
Yeah, because I know they are doing it's called the lighting effect study on station, and it's exactly that. LED lights change them to a little warmer things in your crew quarters or something, so at night you don't have this big fluorescent light in your
Absolutely.
in your face.
Yeah, they use them in Hera too.
Oh yeah, they do. That's right.
The whole bottom floor of the lab has a completely different set of lights than the habitation floors, both with the galley and the exercise equipment and stuff, and then the sleeping tents, on the very top floor of Hera. So
Yeah. Just actually learning some of this stuff from Hera, from this lighting effect study. I actually put like a blue light filter on my phone and on my computer. Like so at night I can browse a little bit without having to worry about it actually affecting my sleep.
Yeah.
Which after learning about it, I realized, oh my gosh, that's why I'm not sleeping. It's because I'm screens before bed. You can't do it.
So in terms of, speaking of screens, they will have laptops.
Cool.
Anywhere between 2 and 4. There might be a couple laptops and a couple of iPads, and all of that is still to be determined. But it is currently accounted for in terms of the mass allotment for that kind of a system.
All right.
And there's some dependencies there and some reasons why we would use that stuff. One is to get rid of a bunch of paper, right? You can do all of your procedures and stuff from your tablet. They do that on station all the time now. And another, especially from the crew health perspective, is that's how they would be able to do any sort of video conferencing, right, with home.
Ah.
So I say that at the same time, the way that EM2, the EM2 vehicle is currently equipped, it's only got the S-band communication technology.
So only radio, no visual.
Pretty much.
Okay.
You might be able to squeeze a little bit in there, but pictures, but probably not real-time Skype-like video, right?
Yeah.
So, but there is some potential to expand Orion's capability with optical communication.
Okay.
And once they would do that, then for sure they'd be using these laptops to do more, videoing with their families at home. But they absolutely will have time each day, or at least every other day or something along those lines, to be communicating with their families.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So that's part of their day, right? Actually, that's a good conversation to have. Is we know that they are, they're going to be working out. That we know that they're going to be sleeping. what's a day on Orion like on this mission? I guess, talking with family, but, is that built into the mission profile?
So we are flying people that are very good pilots for a reason. Good pilots and good scientists, right? Okay, well, I guess it's pilots, scientists, and engineers.
All right.
And the reason for that is because you need people. This EM2 mission is a mission that has not been done before. It's similar things have been done in Apollo, but that spacecraft was different, and the designs and how we got the mission done was a little bit different. So this EM2 mission is really a checkout mission, and there's a lot of dynamic phases of flight, a lot of translunar injection burns and stuff going on. We're co-manifesting a payload on this mission, so there is a lot to, and it's just the first time that all of this stuff is going to be used in the manner that it was meant to be used by humans, right? EM1 will test out a lot of the structure and the systems that are just automated and controlled from the ground, so that's good. But this is when the humans will kind of, be doing the wringing out of all the different things that may or may not have been known about how this design is going to work. So, So they're going to be doing a lot of, checking out, a lot of system checkout, and kind of on purpose, kind of driving certain systems to do certain things. They're going to be piloting and navigating that spacecraft through all the different dynamic phases of flight. They are going to be, there probably will be some science, but I don't expect that to come until like a little bit later missions, once we've really kind of fleshed out what the system can handle and what it can, because they need to be ready just in case something just isn't working the way it was planned to, designed to, for whatever reason.
Right.
They will spend a little bit of time doing their meal prep and mealtime, and for the most part, that's kind of the only planned relaxation time, right? They do have their personal time of personal hygiene, and which usually is right after the exercise, right? And but as a crew, and being able to just relax, sit back, and I would say drink your coffee, but squeeze your coffee because it's in the same kind of it's like a Capri Sun for coffee.
All right.
Same kind of thing with a special straw on it that keeps it from leaking out when you're not actually sucking on it. And so from that standpoint, there is meal prep time. The food comes in lots of different kinds of packages that take different kinds of preparation, that whether that's just heating or putting water in and letting it sit out and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So they'll prep the food, they'll prepare their coffee, and then they'll sit back and eat, and they'll do that 2-3 times a day. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the extent of what they're going to be doing on EM2. And then once we start getting, hopefully we'll understand how these systems behave and how much maintenance they all really require, and be able to move into doing more science, even on the shorter Orion missions, and then extend that into what the Deep Space Gateway would have with their habitation module and their labs and stuff.
All right. I can think of a lot of different podcast episodes just on all of this, right? We could probably do one just on EM2 so people understand what that's all about. We could probably do one just on some concepts for Deep Space Gateway. There's a lot of because I can definitely ask a lot of questions, but we will be here for hours.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah.
It's freezing in here.
I'm so sorry. I should have said to bring a jacket. We did talk briefly with Najud about EM1 and just the structure of that mission. Real brief, right? Another thing we need to do is actually cover EM1 through and through. Mm-hmm. But that's going to be no crew. It's going to be going translunar injection way out past the moon, coming back super fast to test the heat shields. And you're right, a lot of it is structural and just understanding about the spacecraft.
Yep.
Do you think you can give a 2-minute explanation of EM2, or is that really something we should probably save for a podcast?
Well, for the 2-minute explanation, we will be launching from Kennedy Space Center on top of the SLS, and there will be a co-manifested payload along with this mission. So not only is it the first manned mission of Orion, but we will also be bringing a cool little payload along with us. The AA2 I was trying to think about the launch abort. So there will be the last system on top of the Orion. So in terms of the rocket stack that you'll see SLS, you'll see Orion, but Orion will be covered by the last shroud, the launch abort system shroud. But the test of that system is actually coming up before EM1. So that'll be really exciting to see.
Yeah.
So once after we launch, and we get rid of the last because we didn't need it. Thank goodness, right? Everybody's cool. We will be going around the orbit one time in kind of a low Earth orbit, and then we'll continue on into a high Earth orbit, at which point we'll kind of separate from the first stage and let that go, and the co-manifested payload and Orion will go in different directions, both going to the moon, but in different orbital trajectories.
Okay.
So there will be 2 different stages of the rocket taking these 2 things in 2 different directions, and they'll do 2 different translunar injections. But at that point in the mission, the Orion and the service module are heading out to the moon, as are the co-manifested payload, or as is the co-manifested payload. When it is on a trajectory that's going to take several days to get into a different orbit. It's going to be a near rectilinear halo orbit that the co-manifested payload will be going into, and we will be going into just a free return trajectory around the moon.
Okay. All right. And
that is expected from the Orion perspective. It takes about 10 to 12 days to do that mission.
Okay, 10 to 12, and that's when we're getting to the Orion can last for 21 days, but this is more of a 10 to 12 sort of deal.
Yep.
Okay. So the co-manifested payload, that stays there, right? It doesn't come back?
It does not come back.
But the people definitely do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
So yeah, the co-manifested payload will be staying in that NRHO orbit around the moon, kind of that polar orbit. It looks that way. And yeah, but we'll be coming back.
Cool. All right.
So there's a whole suite of landing and recovery systems as well that allow us to retrieve the capsule once it lands. It allows us to survive re-entry and then get to the capsule and recover it.
Yeah, so landing and recovery, is that like what's included in that package? Is that the parachutes, or am I thinking of something else?
Yeah, like everything that we need on that heat shield, the parachutes. There's a system called the Command Module Uprighting System. That is, or the Crew Module Uprighting System, excuse me, not Apollo. And it is what will make sure that we are able to upright the vehicle should it land with its, docking hatch side down in the water. We don't want it, that's not the proper orientation, right? That would have the crew hanging in a funny position in their seats. So we want it to flip back over on its own. So those come out and inflate. Those are those big orange, balloon things that you see on the top of the capsule. We used them in ep28.
Yes. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. They look like big puffy life jackets, sort of, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
And there's a series of parachutes that go to that. I think there's 11 total parachutes when you think about all the drogues and then the mains. So, that's a whole system in and of itself. Just like the abort system protects you from anything that might go wrong on the pad.
Yeah.
And then we also have a service module abort capability, which is should anything go wrong when you're made it to orbit, but you're something happened that you're not able to complete the entire mission, but you don't have to lose the crew. You can just abort to an Earth orbit and then come back in, intentionally from that orbit instead of having gone all the way out to the moon and back. So lots of orbit capability, a lot of capability for keeping the crew alive. In fact, you've got that launch abort capability, you've got the system, service module abort capability, you've got the 144-hour survival scenario, right? So with it, when the crew is in their suits.
Yes.
And then you also have, should you land just something off nominal, the cabin is required to provide the crew with a habitable environment for up to 24 hours. So that would be a not very fun 24 hours, I can tell you right now. It's going to be, you're going to feel sick just from having gone through what you went through, let alone bobbing and rocking on the ocean.
Yes.
Depending on where you landed, that might be kind of a warm cabin, not a whole lot of cooling available for that whole time. There is ventilation. You open up what's called a snorkel fan and you will get airflow. But yeah, it's going to be, but the point is that they're not going to, they will be able to stay alive and be kept safe on the ocean for up to 24 hours.
All right. A lot of things to think about for worst case scenario, but it seems like you got it like covered all along the way. Right? You got launch abort, you got crew survival within the suits, you got this whole waving in the ocean, but still able to, figure it out, even if the capsule lands upside down, flipping it up like right side up. So
yeah, that is basically what human spaceflight is all about. Like, in order to bring back, that experience that they have, and to be able to use that knowledge and expertise during the mission, you got to keep them alive and you got to keep them performing well. So all of that goes into making sure that those are national assets at that point, right? all of our astronauts that go and get all this knowledge.
The human in the human space flight is definitely the most important. For sure. That's for sure. Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was an awesome description of. I felt like I was there. I felt like I was living in Orion. I felt like I was slurping on those things through the suit. I didn't want to, but I felt it. But yeah, no, that was really awesome. We're definitely, and I thought of so many different more podcast episodes that we can do, just covering all of these different things, because this was just like a high level, like, even just, going through the intricate details of living on Orion. There's still so much more to talk about. So definitely looking forward to another podcast. Thanks so much for coming on. Maybe one more time. We'll probably have to have you another time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, cool.
Houston, go ahead.
Stop of the space shuttle.
Roger, 0J, and I feel
Shuttle has cleared the tower.
Became a theme for all mankind.
Actually, a huge honor to break a record like this.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Houston, welcome to space.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. So today we talked with Jessica Voss about living in Orion and kind of the space of how it's all laid out. And there's a lot more that we could have talked about with Orion, as I mentioned at the end of the podcast. If you want to know more right now and just can't wait for another episode of Houston We Have a Podcast, go to nasa.gov/Orion. I would say there's definitely some cool stuff to come in Houston We Have a Podcast, but if you want to know right now, just go to that website, or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, it's at NASA Orion. That's on Facebook. Twitter is at NASA_Orion. And then on Instagram, at Explore NASA is like Orion and Space Launch System, all of that kind of combined. If you have a question specifically about Orion, just use the hashtag AskNASA on any one of those platforms and ask that question there, or you can submit an idea to the podcast. Just make sure to mention it's for Houston We Have a Podcast. This podcast was recorded on November 16th, 2017. Thanks to Alex Perryman, Rachel Kraft, and Laura Rashawn. And thanks again to Miss Jessica Voss for coming on the show. We'll be back next week.